Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's very special Best Practices webinar, Trends in Transportation. We have some great insights from some amazing transportation leaders. And we're doing something a little bit different today. Why not end the year? You know, we got one more webinar actually next month, but we are doing something a little different today. Thanks to Scott Wing, one of our panelists, had this idea. We are going to have you really drive the conversation, no pun intended. So we would love you to tell us what you want to hear most about. There's obviously a lot more trends than just the 5 listed here, but we want to hear what the highest priorities are, and they are ready to just turn on a dime to talk about these things. That's how good these folks are. It's going to be amazing. So in a second, Bridget's going to turn our slide. Thank you so much, Bridget Moore, to be able to tell us about what topics you can vote on. Cybersecurity, cybersecurity threats. Is that one of the topics you want to hear most about? Discipline, documentation, and just all the data in general that you have to keep on both accountability of drivers, but also student discipline issues. Greater expectations from your school as well as from your community. Increased costs just to operate, and electric vehicles. So that's just a sample, that's 5. So Bridget, if you could turn on the poll, here it is. So as we're still filing in, we know that some people kind of, start a little bit later as they join us. So as they are doing that, please take a second to select all the ones you want to hear. We'll just see how those numbers crunch, and then we'll come back to that once we introduce the webinar panelists. But again, cybersecurity, discipline, documentation, data. I know I kind of crunched a few things in there. Greater expectations. We know during the pandemic, there's a lot of grace there as we're all just trying to get by. But are you seeing greater expectations now, or are people still in that gracious mood, especially during Thanksgiving maybe? Increased cost to operate, and then finally electric vehicles. And then I'll just say one last thing about that is whatever the responses to these are, trust me, they're going to make their way into future webinars as well. So we'll dig deeper into those probably on an individual basis in 2023. Wow, that's the first time I think I've said 2023 maybe. So anyway, okay, Bridget, you want to move on to the next slide? And I'm going to turn it over to our Transfinder President and CEO, Antonio Civitella. Tony Civitella, how are you?
Hey, everybody, I'm doing good. So I'm looking at the results of the polls. There's some
don't give it away. Bridget's going to give us.
But I'm not going to give it away.
Go ahead and tease us.
No, but I think it's part of my. I'll definitely tease you. Maybe someone could put a message saying, "I think he meant this," right? I think that's. But listen, I think they're all important, like you just said. They're all important, but everyone says if everything is high priority, then nothing is high priority. Right? If everything is super important, then nothing is really super important. So keep that in mind when we think about priorities, because as much as we think we can multitask, it doesn't work that way. We only could work on one thing at a time. So just like, did you guys know, Cody, I saw you're cooking. I think you guys are probably having some big parties last day of school, I believe, down in Texas. So I'm sure you're probably doing a lot of food, a lot of people eating, which is great. Well, for most of us, Thanksgiving is still 1 week from today. So happy Thanksgiving. It's definitely one of my favorite holidays. It's a lot about food and family. And yet Dallas Cowboys are playing the Giants. So I'm a big Dallas Cowboys fan since I moved to the United States. So I just want you to know, sorry about that. So we need a good win there. It was all about the difference between Christmas and Thanksgiving in my family. Christmas is a lot more formal. You're dressed up really nice. A lot of stress, honestly. Thanksgiving, it's much more relaxed. If you want to wear your sweatpants, wear your sweatpants, because you need that extra space when you're eating. Christmas, we're eating the same amount of food, but it's not comfortable. It's like, man, somehow we need to change that in my family. That's a whole other topic. Rick, I don't mean to talk about that. But speaking of topics, this is great. I love what you guys are talking about today. And really, we have a lot for the attendees and really what the panelists are talking about. These trends, a lot going on here about what you've seen. And I love how you're giving the attendees options to see, what we should be thinking about. I mean, obviously, we have our own ideas, but we got to understand what's keeping most of you up at night. And again, it's your job. There's other things that could keep you up at night, but we know there's a driver shortage, all these things here. Cybersecurity, clearly is a big one. Discipline. By the way, our new platform has that feature right built in. So if you have our new Plus platform, which at this point we are at over 60% of our clients are now on that platform. So thank you to all of you. It's baked in. And if you don't have our platform and you want to figure out how to handle discipline, please send us an email and we'll figure that out for you. So discipline is a big deal for us. Drivers, distracted, cost of operation, those are all important. But which one is more important? Which one is actually keeping you up at night? Those are different from one to another. So let's move on. I want to remind everybody that these webinars are always recorded. You can go on our YouTube channel, and of course, off our Transfinder.com webpage, we have all these things recorded. So good stuff. If somehow some people were not able to attend, and this is important, share the link with them. Obviously we want as many people to attend live as possible, but we know how busy everyone is. It's okay. It's recorded. Pass that along. Or maybe there's something you missed. You want to go back. It's like, what did they just say? Great. 2 weeks from now, a year from now, you can go back and see that. Or someone was not able to come, just send them the link. Please do that. That's how we share and that's how we grow together. So now I got to turn it over back to Rick. Rick, how we doing? We got a great panel today here. So let's go and introduce the panel. I already said Cody. Didn't mean to just bring one person. I just saw his Facebook posting this morning that a big turkey was inside of oven. So can't wait to hear from him. Did it get cooked? Did it get eaten? Was it thumbs up, thumbs down? All that good stuff.
We'll make sure we get to that.
Yes.
And I also heard today that Buffalo got 6 feet of snow. Is that possible? I don't know if that's
no way.
That's what someone said to me today.
6 inches?
That sounds crazy to me. But thanks so much, Tony. This is, by the way, I got a little vocabulary word today. Today's webinar is the penultimate webinar of 2022. It's the second to last. So we'll talk about the next one at the very end, but it is December 15th will be the final one for 2023, but don't worry, because we're going to be hitting the ground running in January as well. We're not going to stop. There's a lot of topics I know that are important to you. So without further ado, let's introduce our panelists. First of all, I want to bring on Cody Cox from Cleveland ISD in Texas. And Cody, why don't we just get right to the meat of the matter here? What happened to the turkey? What's the deal? I think you're on mute, but I don't see your button muted, but I think you're muting. I'll move on. We'll get back to you. Stephanie is from Corning Painted Post in New York. I don't know if you guys got hit with snow already. How are you guys doing over there?
We got a little bit of snow the other night, about 1 to 3 inches, but it melted, and now we have just a dusting.
Okay, same thing with us up here.
I'll take the dusting over 6 feet any day.
Yes, absolutely. Patrick McManamon, I worked on this, Patrick, and I still butchered it. Can you say it for me so I make sure I don't mess it up?
Sure, it's McManamon.
McManamon. I said it multiple times. I was saying it at dinner time last night just to practice. And then, then the lights are on and then I messed up. Patrick. Thanks so much. I'll come back to you all to tell me a little bit about yourselves and your role there and a little bit about your history. Scott Wing from Cedar Rapids. So, by the way, Patrick is with NASDPTS, and he's also the director of Vermont. So we really appreciate the national perspective that you can bring to our conversation today. Scott Wing, Cedar Rapids in Iowa. How you doing, Scott?
Doing great.
This is the guy.
Dusting of snow in Iowa.
You did get a dusting of snow? Okay. My sister-in-law is from Davenport, so I always got to give a shout out to Iowa, a very special place. Jenny Robinson with TransPar. if you can hop on, and then Cody, come back on. We don't want you to leave us here, but Jenny, where are you located?
I am in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and I may be the only person here that does not have snow and perfectly content with that.
Well, Cody may have you there too. He's in Texas. Cody?
Does that work now?
So we got you, yeah, we can hear you now. So we have, by the way, I wanted to give congratulations to Cody, since you're the closest to Houston on the World Series win. And I'm sorry, Jenny, since you're the closest to Philly for the loss. And I'm a Mets fan, so we lost before it even got started. But anyway, congratulations to you guys. And Cody, you're with Cleveland ISD. So I'm going to start off real quick. Oh, Cody, going back to Tony's question, what happened to the turkey? What's the story there?
So what he saw wasn't a turkey. He saw a chicken. We had bought a new air fryer and we cooked the whole chicken. So it looked like a turkey. It tastes good, but it wasn't a turkey.
And can you come a little closer to the mic too? You sound a little bit distant, but I could hear you, but just a little closer. All right, so I'm going to start with Cody actually, and then we'll work our way back to Jenny, Scott, and Patrick and Stephanie. Tell us a little bit about you, your role, and maybe a little bit about either your operation or your district, whatever kind of gives us a sense of where you're working.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know why this thing's acting up. So again, Cody Cox, Cleveland ISD, in Texas, we're right outside of Houston. We transport right a little over 10,000 students a day. I'm the director of transportation. Like I said, we run a pretty large operation for a district our size. We run 125 buses a day across them, and we're 3-tier, and we are the fastest growing district in the state. So we add about 5 to 6 riders a day. We enroll about 25 kids a day.
Wow. Thanks so much, Cody. Jenny.
Good morning, everyone. I am with TransPar Group as a consultant, one of the many transportation managers. I am currently assigned to Bethlehem Area School District, and we are running approximately 90 routes with 22 district schools and upwards of a total of about 75 schools altogether.
That's a huge responsibility there. Scott.
I'm the transportation manager for the Cedar Rapids Community School District in Iowa. We are the second largest school district in Iowa. We have just over 16,000 students. We transport about 8,000 per day. We have about 93 bus routes and about 25 van routes.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Scott. Patrick.
I'm the supervisor of the Vermont DMV Education Unit, and I'm the state director for Vermont. I just ended my 2-year term as president for NASDPTS the beginning of November, and so I'm the immediate past president now. I'm also the chair of the National Congress on School Transportation.
Great. Thanks so much, Patrick. And finally, Stephanie. You're muted too, I think.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
My technical title with the district is senior typist, but that's not what I do. I'm the routing coordinator for the district. We have about 85 routes that cover 238 square miles. We have about 4,500 students that we transport to 21 different schools between private schools and BOCES classrooms and things like that. I've been here a little over 6 years now, and here I am.
Great. Well, thank you so much. So you can see we got a great panel because really there's a lot of experience, a lot of different perspectives. So I think that it's going to be very rich just because you're all coming from slightly different perspectives. So I want to start off just with the panel results. I mean, the poll results here. So Bridget, if you could bring those up and see what people want to hear most about. Okay, very good. Discipline, number 1, 86%. I don't know, Bridget, you tell me. People want to hear more from you than they want to hear me. Give us the results here.
Sure. So yeah, so 86% was the top most interested topic on discipline, documentation, and data. Right behind it, pretty close, are the greater expectations from campuses and parents. 31% are interested in the increased costs to operate these days, 24% on electric vehicles, and 14% on cybersecurity.
So we got discipline, we got expectations and increased costs, and then EV. Okay, hopefully I can remember that. All right. I want to make sure I make it very clear too that all of our attendees, even if you didn't get a chance to vote on that, there is a comment section, question section. So please use that. Some of the best webinars we've had are just people chiming in. And so if there's a topic that you didn't see on there, you can throw that in there. Maybe we can sneak that in there. Or if you want to, as somebody's talking about something, you want to add some perspective, you don't have to agree with everybody. We all know that everybody has different perspective. That's okay. Feel free to add that. And I'd love to, and if you have a specific question, either for a panelist in particular or for the whole group, throw that into it. The more active you're in it, the better it will be. Actually, Bridget, since the first one was discipline, let's throw up our next poll question right away, and then we'll jump into. Sorry, no, that's okay. So we have a poll question. Just, are you seeing an increase in disciplinary issues, bus conduct reports since the pandemic? So if you could just do a quick yes, no, we'll look at the results on that, and then we'll just jump right in. I won't tell you my experience as a young kid on a bus, but I probably wouldn't like all the tracking that's going on these days, because I probably benefited from not everybody knowing just how bad of a kid I was. No, I wasn't that bad. But. Okay, Bridget, you got results there? Okay, so there you go. So it's a major increase. So why don't we just start off with that discussion? So number one, does that reflect what you're seeing? And anybody can just jump in. I'm not gonna, I'll probably grab some of you periodically, but does anybody have anything they want to share about that? Does that resonate with you, or are you one of the 5% that haven't seen an increase in the discipline? And then maybe if you could just add, why do you think that? I know that during the pandemic, we saw a drop in disciplinary issues. It seemed like maybe some people think because of the masks, but anybody have some thoughts that they want to share here?
I think Cody said it best in our emails prior to the webinar, that everything is an investigation. There is no listening to the student, listening to the driver, and coming to a consensus. It's, I need video footage, I need to have witnesses, and so on and so forth. And the amount of time that it takes us to collect all of that data to turn over to the schools is really making it difficult to take care of our regular jobs.
That's a good point. Cody, you want to add in on that?
I think so. It goes into expectation. Can you hear me better now?
No, it's okay.
I don't know. This thing's acting a fool.
You know what? You're so good that we're on the edge of our seats to make sure we hear you.
Yeah. So every district expectation is different, so I'm kind of getting off on a bunny trail, but in our district, we have in-house police. So in Texas, it's very common. So we have our own police officers, whole police department within our district. And so it's become a point where now my supervisor's team has to decide, okay, when we start looking at something, is it criminal or is it administrative, right? And so anytime we get into something, we go, okay, the first thing is we have a whole document that we follow now, kind of walks you through, so every investigation is handled the same way, and they can't, pull it apart on you. And then you get to a point and go, okay, this is actually criminal. We're going to hand it over to PD. PD does their part. The fun part about it is, and then you have in-house police, you probably have the same problem, is that it's criminal, and then it still comes back to administrative. Because 90% of education code in Texas, anyway, is a lot of the punishment is an administrative guideline. It's administrative code. So yeah, Susie assaulted Corey on the bus, so that's criminal. But then they prosecute it, they handle it there. It goes to goes to the judge. But then it still comes back to the schoolhouse, and the schoolhouse still has to do their punishment on that side of it too. Like for suspending from the bus or whatever, right? So the judge is not going to suspend you from the bus. The judge is going to give you, a ticket, a fine, but they're also going to give you, they give you some, what do you call that? When you go clean the park and stuff, okay, I'm having a brain freeze, but, and so that's what we see a lot more work. Everything is an investigation. So we follow this procedure for every single thing we do. Like I have I have 3 of them sitting right here on my desk from this morning that, the supervisors have went through and done. And so it's just constant. It's very much so constant. It's added a lot of work. The days of just pick up the phone and saying, hey, Susie and Corey got into a fight, those days are really over.
That's because everything is held, there's accountability for every single thing. You can't like make kind of, we talked about it a little bit yesterday where, like a police officer who could make an assessment at the scene and say, okay, I'm going to let you off with a warning this time. Well, now, the office knows, hey, you stopped a vehicle. Why didn't you give them a ticket? And if that, I mean, there's just a lot less, I think you even used it the other day about like less leeway to do those kind of things.
Well, and it's
everybody else.
A shift in parents. And so parents used to be, oh, my kid's an angel and stuff, right? And they still are. But the difference, what we're seeing is that we'll say, okay, well, Susie did this, this, and this, and here's our proof that Susie did this. And if we don't go after Susie, well, why didn't you go after her? I guess you don't care. It's weird. Like it's been this weird shift that we have parents upset because we're not holding their child to the wall. And so it's really interesting. It's like
my mom wasn't one of those ones that said I was an angel.
So Rick,
yes.
So my background prior to this was law enforcement. I'm a retired Burlington police officer, and I was the first SRO at the high school. What I was taught at the academy is if it's not on paper, it didn't happen. And we, from an investigative side, one of the things that helps us as documentation occurs, it helps us build a better case. So we may not have taken action the first time, but as more and more incidents occur, it gives us a better picture of, yeah, this has become a real issue and needs to have some action taken. The other thing is, and I hate to say this, but people are suit happy. And if you have any evidence of, or anybody believes that you treated one person differently than another person, as long as you have the documentation that can justify why you did it that way, you're better off than not having that documentation. So I think that's part of the reason why things have become more investigative. On a state level, on a state level, we do the drivers. We don't necessarily do the students, that's up to the school and the local law enforcement. We investigate more of the driver incidents or the district incidents, and we use that same philosophy. We build up, put everything in paper.
Thank you, Patrick. That's a very good perspective. Jenny, I know you had a lot of thoughts about this yesterday. We talked about this, about even just closing the loop on some of these issues as well. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, exactly. I was just talking with a colleague of mine just shortly before our panel discussion today, and discussing how best to create the system where the documentation occurs, the right information gets to the right people and the right administrators, but then it doesn't necessarily end there, that there's some kind of accountability and full circle on everybody's part. And it's not necessarily for us to know, okay, even if the response to that is had a conversation with the student, had a conversation with the parent, we don't need to know the details of what that conversation looked like. It's not really our business until it affects the consequences for the bus. But if there is a temporary or complete suspension of privileges, yes, of course, we want to know that. What's the best way to get that done? And I think that in a lot of cases, it's kind of all over the place because, different districts do it differently and it looks different everywhere, but there's obviously a best practice for that. But I don't know that that's being shared widely, whether it's a Google form or if it's a particular, like similar to a client management system that you can just put it in a database and it's always there and everybody can see it, that kind of thing. But just knowing that it gets to someone and there's some kind of response. I think that's all that the drivers and monitors are looking for, is just a confirmation that their voices are heard.
Yes, yeah, and that's a really good point. And I try not to make these commercials, of course, I'd be remiss to say though, without mentioning, we have Form Finder, which is part of our routing product, and there may be other things, but it's part of Route Finder Plus is Form Finder. It can really be, it can be anything you want it to be, frankly. It could be you can create your own form, or there's other, a lot of our clients have actually created forms that we've made available as templates for this kind of thing, so you can follow through. You know, I know if I got in trouble on a school bus, my teachers might want to know that, especially if it was unusual. It wasn't for me, but if it was unusual and say, well, what's going on with Rick? We said 3 days of something going on. Maybe there's something going on at home. Maybe a teacher might want to be aware of that, or vice versa. A teacher knowing that something is out of the normal behavior, a bus driver might benefit, or an aide on the monitor on a bus might benefit. Maybe they can spend a little more added attention for that. So that's a really good point there, Stephanie. Thank you.
Just to piggyback off of that, it's useful to know that, you know, if you're looking at trends and you see that classroom behavior is far different than bus behavior, then obviously there's something triggering that, or vice versa. And to just be able to kind of have a communication between school staff and transportation staff, since, you know, we are a part of the overall educational experience, but if that experience is very different from one to the other, it's great to be able to look at that.
That's great. That's good. Scott or Stephanie, anything you want to add? I'm sorry, did somebody say something?
I just have one thing. I just have one thing off Jenny. One of the things, so she's correct. You're part of the school community. And one of the things I would strongly urge is, if you're not part of their crisis response group, that you get involved in that. Because a crisis can occur on a school bus and you need to know how to deal with that. Or B, you're going to be providing the transportation from that crisis scene.
Patrick, how do you get involved in that? How do you do that?
Well, I belong to our state. Our state has a statewide crisis response team, and I'm part of a voting member of that as the transportation person. Each school district has their own crisis team, and they do have somebody, whoever provides their transportation is usually part of that. What you do is identify where that team is located and simply ask to be involved if you're not already involved. But it's a great opportunity to have the transportation side known. I think it actually has built a better respect for transportation. Unfortunately, a lot of times, and when I was the SRO at the high school, it wasn't thought of, transportation wasn't thought about as part of a crisis response team, because we only thought of crisis as occurring within the building itself.
Yep, and we've seen a lot of that changing too. We've had a webinar, we've had several where this the idea of being at the table now with the decision makers, and now transportation, from my experience of interviews with many folks like you, is you are definitely not an afterthought anymore. Scott and Stephanie, anything you want to add to that? And then my next question will be just in line with this, is why is there an increase? I'd like to get your perspectives on that as well, but anything you want to add to what's already been said?
So I've seen, first couple of years that I took over here, we had about 1,100 behavior referrals a year, and we've definitely seen an uptick in referrals post-pandemic. And you know, I want to reiterate everybody else here: if it's not on video, it didn't happen. So we make sure that you know, we have good quality equipment. The equipment's operating correctly on those vehicles, and that really the staff need to know that they're being backed up. And Jenny, you really hit that. They need to know that we're taking action, that there's results from this. And I don't know if anybody else on this call understands that there's not enough time in the day to handle all the behavior referrals. You know, if you pull video and you're watching video, it's an hour, minimum an hour for each referral. You know, if you run the calculation out for 1,100 referrals, that's 137 days of referrals, just dealing with referrals. So in our district, we don't forward the referrals to administration or to the school building. We handle it in-house, and the way we do that is I've got a committee of drivers and bus monitors That's all they do between routes is work on behavior referrals.
Wow.
So if it's a student on student contact,
Amazing.
they're dealing with that. If it's a staff to student issue, then that's a supervisor handling those. But
How many people make up that council? What do you call it again?
it's a behavior committee, and we have 3 staff members that work, all the hours in between our routes, which is.
And then is that a rotating thing that you do, like, so that someone's not doing it year in, year out, or do you have the same core people pretty much stick with it?
Let's see, that's a great question. So we have about 1.5 years longevity in that position, and after about that, they're tired of it. They need to rotate out of that position. So
that's a great idea.
We post it up as an additional work opportunity.
That's an excellent, right there. The value of the webinar. I mean, it's free, but the cost of the ticket was already, you just covered it. Plus what everybody else has already said. Stephanie, anything you want to add?
So Jenny was saying how you don't always get a follow through of what the behavior referral was once it goes to administration. And we're kind of in that same boat. We refer everything to administration because we want things to be handled consistently as the school would handle it. So discipline is basically the same across the board. But now that Scott has said that he has his own little team, that's actually, I really like that idea. That's something where the driver and the monitor that was involved in the situation would be able to see, okay, there's someone working on this. They've looked at the video, they've investigated, they've done all of those pieces, and this was the resolution. Where we don't always get what that resolution is at the end of the investigation from the administration side. Really, the only time we know what the resolution was is if the student has been suspended from bus transportation. So
I'm going to throw it out to attendees. I'm sorry, Stephanie, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Okay, I was done.
If anybody has any thoughts on either things that you're doing or any other questions in that area, I'd love to hear it. I'm monitoring these. So if you have another solution that has worked for your district, please throw it in the chat area there, and I'll throw it out to the panel as well. Any other thoughts on that? Any idea why we're seeing an increase in this? I mean, is that just a guess, or are you seeing a trend within this trend that here's what's causing some of these issues?
Rick, I would comment that students and staff both, we've been faced with a lot of mental challenges after the pandemic. It's stressful. It's very stressful, and we've seen a lower threshold of tolerance from our staff, and the kids they're acting out because they don't know how else to act. And that's very unscientific, but that's the way I see it.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
100%.
Okay, Courtney, are you on? I mean, Cody, are you on? Okay. Let's talk a little bit about that's the next topic that resonated with the attendees was just, and we already kind of alluded to it, but greater expectations both within the district, but also just from the community at large. And that can be a lot of things. So I'm going to actually kind of let's kind of narrow it down by what does that even mean? So is it greater expectations in terms of, on time arrivals or door-to-door pickups or something else? So number one, I'd like to know if you agree with that, because that was what the poll results showed. Do you see greater expectations? And then maybe give me a sense of, and I'm just going to go down the line here. I'll start with Stephanie, and then Patrick and Scott, and then finally Jenny. What that means. You seeing greater expectations, and if so, what?
Across the board with everything, there's more expected from staff members because we don't have enough people to cover all of our positions. So as an office staff person, I'm out driving a bus. I'm typically the last person out of the building to do so, but I have to complete my own work assignments and then cover for someone else that either they're taking an after school trip or they're just out for the day. Parents, the expectations, if if Route Finder Plus and Stop Finder says my stop is at 7:02, if that bus isn't there at 7:02, they're like completely off their rocker because we're not on time. Not taking into consideration, you know, maybe the road was a little muddy or snowy or something like that, or maybe they got stuck at a couple extra traffic lights. It's not an exact science. We do our best to be there on a time, you know, consistent time, but just across the board from everyone, the expectations are just so high, and it's becoming more and more difficult to meet those expectations on a daily basis.
When you have those kind of situations, how do you and your team kind of, I don't know, we can't reduce expectations, but how do you handle when you get those kind of, you know, complaints to kind of, I don't know, is that an opportunity, I guess, to help educate the community about the challenge, you know, the driver shortage and other types of situations you're facing?
Well, and when we're on the phone with the parent, that's the first thing we say. You know, we try to be there consistently at the same time every day. There are outside factors. There's traffic. There's trees down in a road. Maybe power lines have been knocked down because of a storm. You know, the bus is running late. We do use the Stop Finder app to send out notifications when we know a driver is running behind 10 or 15 minutes. But sometimes it's just, you know, little Johnny's having a bad morning and doesn't want to leave mom, and it took 2 minutes to get him on the bus rather than 20 seconds to get him on the bus.
That's
and you know, 1 or 2 stops like that can totally throw off the remainder of the route. So, you know, we try to explain to them all of those factors, and some parents are very understanding and, oh, okay, I understand, you know. And then there's the other parents that it doesn't matter what you say to them, they're just not going to be happy with the answer. So we try to handle it on a case-by-case basis and do the best that we can.
That's a really good picture too. I could actually, you can really visualize that kind of thing. You know, I've been behind those buses where it's a little longer to get the Tommy or Susie on the bus. It's always Tommy or Susie, by the way. Tommy or Susie on the bus.
But the other thing, we're seeing an increase in substitute drivers that are not familiar with the route. So yes, they're trying to meet that scheduled time, but if they're driving 10 miles an hour slower trying to find that address, it doesn't take very many stops to put them behind schedule.
Very good, thank you. Cody, just so in case you weren't on, we're working down the line through Patrick, Scott, and Jenny, but the topic is about greater expectations and what exactly specifically does that mean for you and your district, and then how do you handle those expectations, or when people feel like they're disappointed because they feel like they haven't been met. Patrick?
So obviously I don't run a district, so I can't speak specifically for that, but on a state level, we expect a lot more of our state employees, so I'm sure it goes right down the line that there are greater expectations put on the transportation and districts alone. Some of the calls that I receive here in my office from parents are simply that last year it only took, or 2 years ago, it took 30 minutes to get my child to school on the bus, and now it's taken an hour. And they're upset about that. Well, there's a lot of things that play in that, particularly the driver shortage and the change of routes, that, yeah, your child's on the bus a lot longer because they had to cut the routes in half, or they had to cut half the routes, and now the bus is picking up 2 routes. So there are a lot of expectations that I can just imagine that are being put on districts.
It has a ripple effect, it sounds like, where you're, you know. Scott?
Greater expectations for us is higher IEP plans, higher need there. We're seeing more specific IEP language that is limiting the vehicle. We're getting temperature control. In Iowa, we typically don't have air conditioning on our buses, but we're seeing more and more temperature control requirements for our students, which means they're in a type 3 vehicle at that point, or a van. We're seeing, you know, McKinney-Vento has exploded for us. Our district has of 16,000 students, we have 600 that are identified homeless in any given year. And we're transporting a great number of those. So we've had to switch from a yellow bus model to supplement with the type 3 vans. We have 25 van routes right now that just solely focus on those mostly McKinney-Vento students, some foster care, and a few IEP situations. You know, and with anything with expectations, the pressure's on. We're here to provide a service. And I can't reiterate enough that we don't get a lot of praise transporting students. You never get a phone call that says, you guys do a great job today. And you don't get those. You might get once in a while, you might get a couple in a year. But that doesn't mean you don't stop and praise your own staff and make sure that they're acknowledged, that they're doing a great job. So this year we've started writing individualized thank you notes to our staff. We've started just going out and having one-on-one conversations with them and specifically telling them what they're doing a good job of. And that helps.
That's great. That's great. You know, it's like anything else, right? What do they say? Is it the FBI or the CIA where they say, you know, it's only when you 99.999% you're doing your job, no one knows about it, and you're not going to get a pat on the back. It's that point, whatever, when there's something falls through the cracks or something happens, then everybody hears about it. So that's a good point. Just, you know, personal notes, especially today in this day and age where they're so far and few between, they really stand out like never before, and it doesn't cost that much to do. That's really good. I'm going to get to the buses in a moment because we have a poll question regarding that because Jenny had raised this yesterday. So thank you for bringing it up. We'll get to that. Jenny, how about you? Greater expectations, what does it mean? And how do you deal with them?
I think that Stephanie and Scott have both brought up some really excellent points that a lot of us are dealing with. I think the one thing that I would add to that is more of a societal expectation, in that we're seeing a greater pressure on our districts and specifically on our teachers that to be that in loco parentis, that we are trusting our kids to you to educate them, to teach them how to be good people, that kind of thing. And a lot more of that socialization is falling on the responsibility of schools and of the adults that work within a school district. I would also point out that Scott brought up a good point of the added requirements that we have of our students, and particularly with IEPs and with special needs students. And we talked briefly yesterday about how our community is trying to respond to that, and everybody's having the same problems that we're having in our own specific industry, and being able to staff properly and to be able to have enough people and enough resources to provide that, whether it be hearing specialists or occupational specialists or whatever. If a student needs those services and they're not available, you got to go out and find it. You can't, it's not enough to bring those services to the student. Now we're responsible for getting the student to the services. So that's the increase in the number of van routes that justifies that right there, because you have to take them further and further from their neighborhood schools.
Right, we talked about the idea too of you're not going to send a 72 passenger bus to go pick up 1 or 2 children. It may not even be accommodate them in their needs anyway. So good point. And so Cody, you had some time to think about this one now. How are you doing? So expectations, what are you facing and how do you deal with them?
Can y'all hear me good?
Yes.
Okay, that's why I was filling out different cameras. Okay, so everything that everybody said is really true. We're kind of in a weird situation with being such a fast growth district. We couldn't consolidate routes. Every bus already had 70+ kids on them. So it's not like we could double up routes like a lot of districts are having longer routes, and that's causing parents to be upset. We didn't have that option. We've been pretty thankful that we haven't really had a huge driver shortage, really. So the expectations for us is, we have a very unique situation in our district, is just our walk to stop distances and on-time performance, which is kind of what you already spoke about. It's a little different in our world as far as how far kids are walking to the bus stops and putting parameters. So, you know, we went from being a small, little, tiny 4,000 student district to big overnight. And so that's the expectations that our district has that we're constantly working through. Our district is kind of, every district has this, but our district has like direct lines, like this side of the road has this expectation and this side has this expectation. And so we have, you know, you're kind of, we have two separate communities, let's just put it that way. And we're trying to, you know, always bring them together and make sure we're being equitable across the board in all the decisions that we make. You know, we've had some of the issues, but we really haven't. It's kind of weird. You know, my neighboring districts I talk to, they're all having the same issues y'all are bringing up, because they're, you know, they're combining routes and stuff, whereas we're not really having the combined routes issues. It's just more of keeping consistency across the board because everybody's watching.
Yeah, everybody is watching. You know, I have to think about, you know, am I more demanding than I used to be? I hate to say it, but you know, I text somebody, my wife gives me, she says, why are you so like, I text somebody and I don't get a response back in 30 seconds. They waited a half hour. And she's like, really? Like, give me a break. So we can all be, I mean, I don't know, I want to speak for you, but, you know, we have Uber Eats, you know, and, oh, I can, you know, why isn't it here? I said I was going to be here in 20 minutes and it's 21 minutes. What is up with that? You know, so then you know, magnify that when it's your kids and, you know, and so anyway, it's.
And I think you made a good point though, Rick. And so that's where it's important that you have the whole district, which I was listening to y'all the whole time when I was filming the cameras. And it's important that you have the whole district, right, at the table. As far as I'm very fortunate, and I report to the superintendent, and the superintendent pretty much has carte blanche for me. And so, you know, we're very fortunate. Not every district has that. I've been in districts that don't, but it's talking about expectations, like with special needs kids. When kids get ordered to a sped bus, right? You know, some of these parents walk away from a meeting thinking, oh, well, he's gonna ride the sped bus home tonight. No, he ain't. You know. And so, you know, making sure that the teams of the campuses are on board, right? Because it's easy just to say, well, I don't know call transportation. We have created scripts where we say, okay, when you're, you know, a new IEP for a kid that's going to have special services for transportation, and they already have an IEP, but we've never put them on the sped bus. We have a script we've written that we want the diag to read to the parent and say, okay, this is the realistic time frame for implementation. It's real important to get those up front because, like you said, everybody has this high standard of me, right now. And if you don't have a district that is getting in front of that, you know, ahead of that by saying, hey, proper communication, that this is the expectation, this is what we do, you know, and so here's what to expect. And you let that parent walk out the door thinking whatever they think, well, then you let them control the narrative, and now you've got to fight that narrative instead of you controlling the narrative.
That's very good. I also like the idea of a script. Not that they're going to necessarily read it per se, but they know they know, like, this is our messaging. We all have to be on the same page. If I can go to different people at different buildings and I'm getting different answers, number one, people notice that, and then they start. You know, it's just like playing mom off dad or dad off mom. You know, I got grounded by my dad, so I'm going to go to mom and see if I can get off that. You know, whatever. But having that script and consistency, which I keep hearing throughout today's discussion too, about just consistency. Bridget, we have a poll question talking about what Scott brought up, and Jenny had alluded to it as well, the white van fleet, which is basically, Scott, Patrick, I'll have you describe what we mean when we talk about white fleet. What are we talking about?
From our perspective in Cedar Rapids, we have type 3 vehicles. They are Ford Transit vans that transport up to 8 people, including the driver. And we use those for McKinney-Vento transport that goes from many districts over and bringing those students to school. We use those for all of our non-regular yellow bus route type transportation. You can't send a yellow bus out on a long, 3 cities away to go get a couple of students. You got to be flexible with your fleet.
So here's the poll question. If folks could lock in their answers, have you increased your white fleet in the last 5 years? Take a yes or no on that, and then we'll see the results. And then I do have a follow-up question on that. Okay, Bridget, can you give us the results? Okay, not kind of fairly even. Okay. So Patrick, you have some concerns about this. a little bit, even though Scott makes a good point. And you, yesterday when we had our dry run, you definitely understood that. But tell me a little bit about your concerns about the potential increase of that.
So our concerns, and I'll go into first how Vermont handles them. We call them alternative vehicles, and we allow 10 passenger or less. But we put some restrictions on them. We treat those drivers just like a school bus driver. And they have to go through the same process. They have to have the record checks. They have to have their physicals. They're drug tested. They also have to go through our school bus clinic. They have to take we give them what's called a Class D or a regular car license school bus specific endorsement. We have a state specific endorsement that we put on their license. They have to take a driving test and a written test and renew it every 4 years, just like a regular CDL school bus driver. So we treat them the same. The vehicle itself has to have what we call a simple light system. So it has to have the red flashing lights and the school bus sign on the roof of the vehicle. And the drivers are required to use that when they're doing transporting students. And that's the concern, is that if you are allowing vehicles to go out there with a driver that has no training, are you treating that student, who is your most vulnerable students, differently than you would treat a student that's getting onto a 72 passenger bus? Because they may not have the training. If you don't do a record check on them, you don't know what their record looks like, and that's where the concerns are. It's not necessarily a concern of specifically using the vehicle, because especially from Vermont, we recognize that there is a need for them. Like Scott said, you have the McVinty transports, you have special needs transports. We actually have some routes that are mountainous, and they can take a 4-wheel drive van up the mountain better than they can get a bus up the mountain. So it makes more sense for them to go up in a smaller vehicle, and to pick up the students. So we understand there's a need. We just feel that there should be some regulations put on those, for the specifically that truck.
I'm sorry, Jenny, you look like you're nodding your head.
Oh, well, I agree with Patrick, and I think that all of us in the student transportation industry we recognize the necessity for these vehicles because the demands of our operation have changed. But I think that we would all agree that we're hesitant to increase that number of fleet and to increase the number of students that are on vans and what we would consider passenger vehicles, when we know that the bus is the safest, most reliable way to get them to school and to home. But again, the operation just doesn't really, things have changed and society has changed, and it's just different. And if we could get all of our students on yellow bus, I think we would, but it goes back to the assumption that hiring and training for someone to drive a 10 passenger van is easier and doesn't take as long as a CDL training would. But I think all of these trends kind of point to something that I didn't mention yesterday, but thought of today, was the increase in the need for and the request for professional development of our staff. And that because we are expected to know more and to be well versed in a lot of different situations, and to know about autism and to know about trauma and how that affects students and how that affects their behavior, our staff is asking for these things, and we're doing our best to provide them on a more regular basis.
That's a really good point.
Rick,
yes.
I think with what Jenny said, it comes specifically down to the fact that, yes, the school bus is the safest form of transportation. The alternative vehicle is used to supplement that. It's not used to replace it. And that's a very important distinction. We shouldn't be looking at those vehicles to replace the school bus. It should be used to supplement the school bus transportation.
Stephanie, I see you're nodding your head. When you nod your head, you're in trouble. I'm gonna get.
Well, I agree. When it comes to like the McKinney-Vento and our foster students that are in the outer lying areas of our district, if at all possible, we do try to incorporate them into a regular school bus run where the driver of a 72 passenger vehicle is driving that vehicle to pick up that student prior to their normal route, because we don't have enough people to do that white fleet driving. So we can't get enough drivers in the seat of a bus. We still can't get enough drivers in the seat of a white fleet vehicle. So we're just trying to change our routes as best we can to accommodate all of the things that are being put on us with those special accommodations. Scott had said earlier about temperature control vehicles. That's something that is becoming more and more the norm with some of our students. We never had air conditioning on our vehicles prior to, I think about 4 years ago, we started purchasing our small buses with that air conditioning unit in there to accommodate some of our special needs students. But it's just, again, the demands of society, the demands of what our students need as far as their disabilities and their special needs. It's just more and more expectations, and us not always having those resources to meet those expectations and doing the best with what we have.
Which is embedded in kind of one of the results, and we didn't even get to, but we kind of did get to, but not we didn't zero in on it. Was just the increased cost to operate, period. Scott, I think I saw you shaking your head, and then I want to have us close out, and one takeaway that you would like anybody attending this to, either if it's something to bring back to their office to share with their team, or bring back to their school board or superintendent. What's that one takeaway? So get that in your, start thinking about that as we wrap up. It always goes so fast. I can't believe it's already almost done. But Scott, did you have a thought that you wanted to add here?
I wanted to add to Stephanie's comment about staffing the Type 3 vehicles or the white fleet. One of the things we found successful is to pull from your, we call them bus attendants, from your bus monitors. Those are the ones that they don't quite want to drive that yellow bus, but if you talk to them and discover that, you know, some of them do want to drive, and the white fleet is more, it's just easier to drive something smaller in their mind, and that's where we've found a lot of success in staffing our white fleet is through your attendant or your monitors.
Can you get those folks that once they start doing that, they may be more open to going to a larger fleet? I see Cody's, I'll have you go first, Scott, then go to you, Cody. No, okay, mixed. Okay, Cody, I see you shaking your head on that.
Well, we do it all the time, so we're unique, and that's what I was going to say. So, obviously, we're very unique, it sounds like. We have monitors on almost all of our big buses. So I employ over 100 monitors. So we don't have to, by law, have them on anything but a sped bus. So it's real easy for us to say, yank the monitor and say, hey, you know, we need you to go with this kid. But what I agree with, kind of going back for a minute, is like what Patrick said. In the state of Texas, I could put you in a Suburban, let you go get a kid, and I could put a shop truck if I wanted to. There is no requirements, and I think that's scary. We personally obviously don't do that. We do our due diligence and we run them through the program just like a school bus driver. But yes, we do find that they drive a little bit here for us, a little bit there. In Texas, we have our non-CDL buses, so they're under 14 passengers, and so a lot of times we get them behind the wheel of those, and then they're like, oh, this ain't so bad. And we do, I would say probably right now, 40 to 45% of our current school bus drivers driving a commercial school bus all came from being a monitor.
Very good. Very good. All right. Well, I can't believe we're getting ready to wrap up here. There's so much more, but you guys gave so many great insights on a lot of areas. So Scott, that was a good experiment. I liked it. So I'm going to probably steal that again. So we're going to go through the line again. I'm going to start with Stephanie, and then Patrick, Scott, and Jenny. Cody, close us out, and then Tony will say a couple of final words, and then I'll close us out for the rest of the day. But again, I just want to thank you all. So Stephanie, what's one takeaway that anybody on here should, remember?
I think for everyone in general, not just transportation, but everyone has to have some patience and grace. We're all spread thin. We're all doing the best that we can. We all are focused on the best things for our students. It just might not be what the person on the other end thinks is the best thing for their student.
Very good.
But we truly do the best that we can, and try and go above and beyond. But a little patience and a little grace goes a long ways.
Like that. A little grace goes a long ways. That's good. Patrick.
So you have a difficult job and you don't get the praise that you should. But coming from a grandparent of 2 grandchildren that ride the school bus in San Antonio and just adore their driver, I want to thank you for what you do in getting them back and forth home safely. So thank you very much.
Very good. Scott.
I would say one takeaway would be invest in your staff. And I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about time and training, and just appreciate your staff. Those 3 things will take you farther in transporting students than anything. And it's an investment for you, but just that's very important.
Not to sound corny, but I do believe it's true. It does pay dividends. It will pay that. You will reap a benefit from that. So, because they're going to want to stay with you. They're going to probably tell their friends if they're looking for some potential side work to work. You create a whole culture. Cody, I know, is really big into culture with his team. So thank you, Scott. That's great. Jenny.
Honestly, I don't think I could come up with a better takeaway than what Scott offered, because that is critically important. The one thing that I would add is that the needs of our students in our community is going to diversify, and it's going to create a different demand on our operation, and to do your best to get ahead of what that might look like so that your fleet reflects that, and get your requisitions in early.
Very good. Very good. And Cody.
So Scott stole my soapbox. Normally I'm all about employee relations. So that's important to me. But, Jenny talked about getting your requisitions early. Really, I think the biggest takeaway, besides all the things everyone else has said, is data. You need to make sure to get those requisitions approved, you got to have the data. So we got a $1.5 million budget increase on the operations side this year because I have the data. And so, it's really important. We get caught up in just trying to get things done. Like Stephanie said, we're so busy and we're just go, trying to meet everybody's expectations, trying to get the job done. But are we collecting good data? Are we keeping good records? And so when you keep good records and have good data, you have everything to support your soapbox.
I can't think of a better setup for Mr. Data himself, Tony Civitella, who is all about data. This guy makes Excel spreadsheets sing. He's like Liberace with Excel. So Tony, what's your final takeaway?
That's a good one. Liberace, it's a good one. Well, I tell you, there's one big takeaway, especially what the audience wants to see. It's about student discipline and really all the incidents. And I'm a little bit concerned that so much pressure is put on transportation to track all that. And I want to make sure that it's the same system across the district. It's not just you, or they're segmented, because that's what's happening. Let's face it, everything is high, which means some of the kids, I don't know if I want to call them smart, because they're a troublemaker, but they figure it out. They figure out a way to get away from stuff because there's disjointed system from the school and from your department. And some of these, I hate to even give them a name, like they're slick. And you guys know what I'm talking about. They know how to get around this stuff and just sit back, because you want to talk about experience, get rid of those troublemakers, and everything's going to be better. It's going to be my takeaway. If I'm a driver, I have a lot of things I want. I want a school district that it's up to date with technology, but also has a way to support me and back me up. Because I tell you, I think discipline, it's not a coincidence that the audience wants to see more about that. It's the 800-pound gorilla that really affects the morale across the board. And I wish we could work better together to not just get your transportation department track these little boogers, but across the district. So, but I could go on and on in this one. It's a big topic for me.
It is a big topic. I think we're going to be revisiting a few of these topics. So thank you so much, Tony. If you could go to the next slide. I want to just let everybody know that we are always looking for stories across the country, any story of what has worked for you. I will just warn you that if you send us something, we'll use it probably. And we also will probably ask you to be a panelist because the more people we can get in front and just hear their ideas and pick their brains, there's a lot of ideas that came from today's very short webinar, really an hour. There are definitely 2 or 3 ideas I could see people actually implementing right away, just like I'm thinking of Scott's right away of the discipline committee there. So anyway, so if you have something that works for you, we'd love to hear it, and I'll definitely be in touch with you. If you can go to the next slide, Bridget. I just want to let everybody know that our final webinar of the year is December 15th, which is 10 days before Christmas. So please mark your calendars for that. It'll be closing the year strong. I'm just going to give you a little hint. January is going to be the very original topic of starting your year even stronger. I don't know, why not? So anyway, so mark your calendars for December 15th. And then finally, Bridget, we can go to the last slide. I want to wish all of you, we all want to wish you a very happy Thanksgiving. It's exactly a week from today. That's why we couldn't have the webinar like we normally have on the last or second to last Thursday of the month. I didn't think anybody would want to join us on that, but we hope you do all have a very happy Thanksgiving. And I like that little cartoon at the very bottom. Grateful for the school bus community, and we really truly are. And your community, even if you don't get the pats on the back, Scott, trust me, they do appreciate you. Tony's been writing all these nightly notes to our team, and one of the quotes was something like, you know, an unsaid thank you basically does no good for anyone. So don't keep it inside. So if any people in the community happen to be on this webinar, please make sure you let your transportation department know how grateful you are for the hard work they do. And I hope everybody here has a good rest of your day, and we'll see you back here next month.
Bye.
Bye.